Hello everybody, my name is Paul from the New News, and I hope that everyone is having a fantastic Sunday night. I hope that everyone enjoyed their Sunday. I hope that you're having a wonderful Monday morning, if that is the time and place that it is for you right now, as one of our mods pointed out to me here in the chat. But there is a lot of stuff going on in the news today. There's plenty of stuff going on throughout the world. A lot of different crises obviously going on, whether or not you're talking about war and conflicts, you're talking about terrorism, or you're talking about natural disasters. This environmental change is wreaking havoc across the world. And we have a couple of interesting topics to go along with this too, something a little bit uplifting. But luckily we can keep things uplifting here because you guys have made an awesome community. And the reason that you guys have made this such an awesome community is because we get to be the news that gives back to the very news topics we talk about here every night on the channel. You guys have been able to support us in this endeavor, and we really can't thank you enough. But if you check out the description below, you're going to see a ton of different links down there. You're going to see stuff that's for Ukraine and for other parts of the world, including the Horn of Africa and also for Southeast Asia. And we're constantly looking for more. In fact, we had some that was actually someone let us know about earlier right before the stream began, which is really awesome. We're currently going through and we're vetting a bunch right now to get added to this stream. And what we're looking for are two different things. We're looking for, one, that these are legitimate organizations, that we can verify their credibility. And two, we want to make sure that 80% or more of their proceeds that they get from donations actually go directly to their programs, meaning 80% or more is directly helping people. We can verify that. 20% or less is going to be going to salaries and administration's costs, so we can keep those costs low and help as many people as possible with this news stream every single night. We're never doing super chats on this channel, and we're never pushing merchandise. Everything to include when we get large enough to put official donations directly onto the stream, but everything is going to charity and to helping people directly affected by the very news that we deliver. And with that, thank you very much for the support that you've given us and given to the channel, and given, of course, to those organizations. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's fine. Give us a like and subscribe and let your friends know about us. The more people that are here, obviously, the more people get to enjoy the news that we're delivering. But even more so, the more people that are here, the larger impact that we can actually have on the people that we are talking about here on the channel. We can have a much greater impact in Ukraine. We can have a much greater impact in the Horn of Africa. We can have a much greater impact in crises ongoing throughout the world. And so with that, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and dive right into the news that we have here in Ukraine. We actually start off our news here in the western part of Ukraine, where a couple of different things have occurred. So the first thing is that the Ukrainian Ministry of Internal Affairs announced that yesterday, 18,000 vehicles crossed Ukraine's border with the European Union, some 85,000 people in total. And that is coming from them regarding July, as of the statistics on July the 9th. An immense amount of vehicles, including 60 trucks with humanitarian aid that have been issued to coming across the border. However, with this massive move of migration, a massive move of people regarding refugees and incoming humanitarian aid and security aid, there's been a lot of questions that have arisen as to the exploitation of people, human trafficking, etc. Unfortunately, that with the crises that are going on throughout the world, unfortunately, there's a small group of people, generally speaking, within the population, who see this as an opportunity, whether or not to commit internet fraud, which is why we go through and vet these organizations, or whether that is through trafficking people. They see a way to make money. They see an opportunity, and the thing is that this is always a problem, and not everyone who may seem to be a good person necessarily is, as is the case here, where Ukraine has always suffered from quite a large amount of corruption, and they put a lot of good faith efforts for reforms to cut down on this, but there's still a lot to do. The EU noted that, and that's actually one of the reasons why they were admitted as a candidate so quickly, because they have done so many reforms, and we continue to see that progress here. This is the Ukrainian border guards, which arrested a Ukrainian police officer here at the border. And the reason for this is because this police officer was suspected of extorting civilians along one of the border crossings here. And we actually have a video coming out of that from today.
Протягуй туди. Эти?
Вот этот.
Какой? Вот этот. Сюда иди, блядь. Сюда нахуй. Руки, блядь. Руки, сука. Руки, блядь. Руки, нахуй.
Подожди, автомат, автомат.
Руки.
Я сейчас сесть,
Руки. Ложись, блядь, дойдешь.
ложусь, сука.
Ложись, сука, блядь. Лежать, нахуй, придурок, блядь. Руки, нахуй. Лежать. Руки, блядь. Руки. Руки.
Ты что, блядь? Пусти, пожалуйста.
Руки, придурки. Попали, придурки, блядь.
Челюсть, пожалуйста.
Попали, придурки, блядь.
Пожалуйста, челюсть. Челюсть, пожалуйста, челюсть под голову, пожалуйста. Пожалуйста, челюсть под голову, челюсть под голову.
Руки. Оружие, блядь.
Руки, Саш. Это что, я пошел.
Руки за голову, я сказал. Шо, блядь, в карман?
Вот огни, сказал.
Курение, нахуй.
Морда вниз, сука, сказал. Я, сука, сделал. Морда вниз, блядь. Морду вниз.
Сука, ты война, нахуй ты бабки брать будешь?
Я не понял.
So Ervis Chang actually asked, and does that mean the police officer was asking people for money? I think he was. I don't know. So that's the That's the thing. Is a lot of this is very fragmentary information, and we try here as best as we can on the channel to try and fill in the gaps here and kind of help you understand what would lead to these kind of situations. But unfortunately, a lot of times there's a lot of fragments of information that come out. All that was stated was that this police officer was extorting civilians. What that could mean is that he was saying that you have to pay him in order to be allowed to cross. That is 100% something. He could be not just accepting bribes, but going out of his way to accept to demand bribes in order to cross the border. But truthfully, I don't know. That is probably the case. That seems the most likely thing that would happen. But to say that Ukraine doesn't have issues would be to completely disregard how the world works. And it's important that we recognize the faults on the Ukrainians, including, everything from extortion of civilians to smuggling of weapons onto the black market, which we do know is happening to some extent, and to clear up into the big things. I'm talking about war crimes, where we have talked about possible war crimes committed by Ukrainian forces here right on the channel, including some of the attacks that happened within Donetsk, where they were using grad systems as opposed to precision strike weaponry. Now, we can, there is a lot of debate on all of this stuff that's happened. We've even talked about the UN chiming in on this topic as well. To say that Ukraine doesn't have issues is to completely negate reality. And we have to understand the reality that that things aren't perfect. So the extortion of civilians and human trafficking is an extremely large topic when you're talking about the war in Ukraine. The amount of internally displaced people and the amount of refugees fleeing the country, these are people that are already in crisis, and unfortunately that makes them especially vulnerable, women, children, and the elderly especially, to human trafficking and to extortion and all these different, unfortunately, nefarious means that some people, once again, see as an opportunity. There's a lot of great people that are working on these exact issues, including people developing apps to help with these. So we immensely great support on that. But it is still going to be a fundamental issue going forward, probably for a long period of time. As we jump up here into the northern part of Ukraine, this is along the border with Belarus, and Ukrainian border guards are preparing for possible other offensives coming up here in the north. They're mining roads and railways along the border with Belarus. The reason being is the fact that Belarus has built up its military forces for quote-unquote military exercises along the border with Ukraine. Alongside this, we know that the Russian Federation is also bringing more troops and equipment back into the country of Belarus, specifically in the Gamel region. This is bringing up more tensions and a possible fear of an additional invasion coming out of the north that would bring Ukraine into a two-front war. The seriousness of the situation means that troops have already actually been deployed in areas such as Lviv, where we've seen a massive number of concentration of Ukrainian troops over the last few weeks in order to counter such an offensive should it occur. Preparatory responses or Ukrainian border guards are now mining these areas in order to slow down any offenses that may occur, as the roadways are essentially are absolutely vital up here in the northern part of Ukraine, where otherwise it's heavily forested and it's full of mud. Well, we can take a look at some of this here. if it would like to load. And this is probably, you know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. They're not going to be fooled twice, so they're going to go ahead and make these preemptive arrangements along here on the border in order to at least slow down any offensives that may occur. With that, we skip over Kyiv today, and we immediately jump down into the different regions here in the Donbass and Kharkiv. And we can see here that more Russian missile strikes occurred on July the 9th here in Kharkiv. Chuihiv, Izium, Bohudikiv, and Kharkiv districts in Kharkiv region on July the 9th. One person was killed, a man and a woman were injured, local residential buildings were destroyed, and that's coming from Oleh Subinov, the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration. Kharkiv has seen a lot of action, especially when it comes to artillery strikes over the last couple of weeks. Russian forces were initially pushed back with some minor counteroffensives since then, especially when you get down towards Izium, going towards Izium Oblast, a little bit up here in this pocket in the north, but not a whole lot otherwise. However, most of their main artillery just doesn't have the range capabilities. Their BM-21 Grads, their Tornado systems, their DPK-30s, they simply just don't have the assets to fire effectively within the Kharkiv Oblast and to hit Kharkiv proper. What this means is they're relying on a lot of Iskander-M missile systems that are being fired from Belgorod across the border and firing them into Kharkiv, which is causing an immense amount of destruction. They're really only hitting civilian infrastructure when they're hitting Kharkiv at this point in the war, and they really have no strategic point in trying to take Kharkiv or making advances within this region. They don't have the force concentrations, the artillery capability, and they also simply don't have the forces amassed here to conduct enough of a counteroffensive that it would be effective in putting Kharkiv back at risk. At this point, it's too late in the war, and at this point, it's simply no longer strategically or tactically viable for them to do so. So you jump down here into Severodonetsk, we have another sign that has been painted, much like the sign that was located in Mariupol, which was painted in the colors of the Russian Federation. The sign for Severodonetsk has also been given the same treatment. We can see this being broadcasted right here on the Russian state-run media news agency RIA News. Take a look.
Смотрите, вывеска города Северодонецк. Начало положено, я скажу.
Поехали, да, я обратил внимание.
Я уже сегодня Знамени Победы уже поклонился.
Вообще красиво сделали.
Вывеска Северодонецк. Видите, уже покрашена.
Да, очень красиво, да.
Дождались, флаг наш. Очень долго ждали. Очень долго ждали. Слава Богу, это наконец-то состоялось, и поэтому на душе, наверное, если сказать радостно, это, наверное, ничего не сказать, да? Вот, поэтому мы очень благодарны тому или тем людям, которые это и освободили, с одной стороны, и с другой стороны, это то, что наконец-то Северодонецк окрашен в те цвета, в которые он всегда был, есть и будет. Поэтому спасибо огромное всем тем.
So, here's something important to note. Okay, so these flags, so these signs, Mariupol and Severodonetsk, and we've seen a couple others as well, have all been painted in the Russian colors. Okay, now, the whole point of this war, or at least for the Russians, one of the most big points that they make is the fact that this is for, this is for the liberation of the Luhansk and the Donetsk People's Republics, who are separate sovereign nations. Okay. Both the LPR and the DPR have their own flags. The separatists have their own flags. Why is this sign being in the Luhansk region, not in the LPR flag colors? Why is it in the Russian flag colors? Mariupol being in the Donetsk Oblast, which according to Russia is part of the DPR, the Donetsk People's Republics. Why is the sign for Mariupol and Russian is in the colors of the Russian flag and not the flag of the DPR. If these are independent sovereign nations, according to Russia, why are they in Russian flag colors and not the colors of those nations which do own them? At least according to the Russian Federation. That's because, once again, they aren't independent nations. No matter how much Russia would like to say that they're not independent nations. This is not independent territory. These are territories occupied by the Russian Federation. So it's very important to point these are inconsistent. These are inconsistencies with their very own rhetoric, and that's the important thing to be pointing out. The thought process of the LPR and the DPR is irrelevant. They don't exist. They're Ukrainian separatists. Really, they're Russians that are funded by Russia to destabilize these regions in order to make it easier for the Russians to take over and to give them a way of forcefully conscripting the people within those regions to fighting for them to make up for manpower shortages, because if Russia were to do it, it would be a war crime. Not that that really matters to Russia. We've seen them already committing a egregious amount of war crimes, but that's the point. If the LPR and the DPR in the Russian mindset actually mattered, then this wouldn't be in the Russian colors. It just wouldn't. We'll get some more inconsistencies in Russian rhetoric here very soon, but I figured this was very important to point out. As you jump down here, we can see that HIMARS are truly superior here on the battlefield. There's been a lot of noise regarding the propagandist channel like Gherkins, which is a Russian propagandist channel, that the S-300 and S-400 systems have not shot down a single HIMARS missile. And the Russian air defenses are completely unable to track or intercept their Western weapons, to the point that the S-400 can't even defend itself. This strike here, it was reportedly 40 kilometers behind the front lines in the Luhansk Oblast. So, very obvious that these systems just simply cannot fight back. And that's a great thing, because the better you can target Russia's capabilities to continue war, such as hitting their logistical capabilities. The amount of munitions destroyed is really minute when it comes to the numbers. What really matters is the fact that it's bogging down Russian logistical trains and capabilities. So keep that in mind, because you're not destroying enough ammunition every time you hit an ammunition depot. Sure, it's an annoyance, but you're not really doing a whole lot. But what you are doing with destroying that ammunition depot is now the trucks have to drive further. They have to burn more fuel. They have to carry less payloads. They have to make less trips. So the troops at the front line are taking longer to get resupplied. They're getting less supplies and less frequently, and that is the important point. In destroying these ammunition depots. Jump over here into the Luhansk district, where once again, Russia Tachka-U missile systems. Crazy, I know. The Russians vehemently say that they do not have Tachka-U's in their inventories. They do not use them. The separatists do not use them. They hammered that over and over and over and over again, saying that the only people that use these are the Ukrainians when they hit Kramatorsk. We showed you that day 6 different instances in which the Russians had Tachka-U's, and we're shipping them. There were some in Bogomel. There were some in the Luhansk. We saw some in Russia. We saw them on the trains coming through Russia, all from different stockpiles. We've seen them used in launches. We showed you one yesterday that launched. It was flying the Russian flag. Today, here are another set of Russian Tachka-U systems that are running around. This has actually been geolocated to this intersection here in Ludahin. This intersection making this turn, coming down this road and making this turn. And these are Tachka-U systems in the Russian arsenal, painted with Russian invasion colors. So go ahead and take a look. And there it is. You can see the V painted on the side and the Z painted here. And this is a Toshka U missile system. Once again, another V here right in the front. What is this? These are Toshka U's. These are Toshka U missile systems. There's a lot of them. This is like an entire artillery company of Toshka U systems. Why is this important? Well, this is so important because, one, it's an inconsistency in the rhetoric, once again. Inconsistencies in Russian rhetoric are really how you can cut through a lot of what they're saying. And it's important when we're talking about misinformation and disinformation campaigns, when we're talking about, what is Russia saying in retaliation for all of the things that are happening here. And these inconsistencies, and these aren't small. The inconsistency with paints, paint schemes. Okay, they're Russian backed. We can see that. Whatever. But the inconsistency with weapon systems being used. If they're saying they don't use Toshka U systems, when an atrocity like 52 people being killed at a train station in Kramatorsk, and then immediately we can point out that they are in fact using Toshka U missile systems, that brings in the question just about everything else rhetorically that is being stated by the Russian Federation. This is why we don't bring up a whole lot from the Russian Federation, from their own news agencies, when it comes to things that they say Ukrainians are doing. If they say that they have taken Crimea, if they're saying that, the Ukrainians bombarded this location or bombarded that location. We have even seen here where RIA News has stated they hit civilian infrastructure when we clearly have video from our own sources before we even saw that article that the Ukrainians hit ammunition depots and we could see the ammunition physically cooking off. And they have said that they hit civilian infrastructure with them. We have posted here on videos the very same day when they attacked the command post that was located in Donetsk, that was located inside of the stadium in Donetsk specifically. They stated that they hit civilian infrastructure and they caused civilian casualties, and they had all sorts of footage, and they said that they were using cluster munitions. We debunked that they were using cluster munitions, and we also had video footage of the cook-off of some of that location, as well as the 155 shells repeatedly impacting the same location because they're using Excalibur rounds. So we know that there were high-precision ordnance. Yes, does that mean that they could say the Ukrainians done the mess once the Russians fired? That's coming from Edifice Chang. Yes, they could. That is something, in fact, they could do. And it's a possibility that it already has occurred in similar situations. That's why we cannot confirm that Ukrainians are the ones that use Grad systems against Donetsk. We can't confirm that because the Grad systems usage, we don't see Ukrainian forces really using Grad systems and heavy amounts of artillery in urban settings. Otherwise, the Battle of Severodonetsk would have seen a ton of Ukrainian artillery usage. Lysychansk, the same thing. Mariupol, the same situation. Kherson, Mykolaiv, you could say the same thing for any of these situations. At least not since really the beginning of the war. There are certainly instances where Ukrainian forces have used artillery in urban settings. You can see that at the beginning of the war especially. But they've really become very restrained. A lot of their artillery usage is in very open areas in the southern part of the front. And we can't independently confirm when a strike has occurred unless we really are getting it from Ukrainian sources. Because usually we get that with video. And we can analyze that video. We can see the ammunition cooking off. I can see the ammunition physically exploding. I can see flares being fired up. It's going in all different directions. Tracer rounds are going everywhere. We can see this. With the Russians, all we get is a picture and a news article from RIA Novosti stating that they blew up, a children's hospital or something crazy that it obviously wasn't. And the two stories are so dissimilar. They're so varied on the spectrum that unless you had both sides of it, you wouldn't know who to believe. But we have enough footage that we get independently here that we can do that analysis and we can see what's actually going on and try to cut through some of that, which is what we do. And we try to stay very, we try to stay very on topic. If when we're talking about war crimes, especially, like I have pointed out here on the channel, and I can go back to pulling it out right out of the different protocols of the Geneva Convention, or straight out of the 1948 Geneva Convention, or customary international humanitarian law, and we go through that very systematically. I can point to you, it breaks this article, this article, this article. Like cluster munitions use. There's very nuanced meanings to it. Russia and Ukraine both maintain cluster munitions. Neither of them are signatories, but the use of cluster munitions in a urban setting is in fact a war crime because it doesn't mitigate damage or loss of civilian life. We can safely say that that's being done by the Russians just because of the amount of cluster munitions usage we not only see here, but also you can go look at the war in Georgia in 2008. You can take a look at Syria. You can take, or where they bombed Aleppo and Idlib. You can go back and you can even look at Grozny, both during the First and the Second Chechen Wars. So there's a historical precedent on that matter, and a lot of this stuff really bears down on, definitely bears down onto Russia. The difference being is that, one, we know Russia is very willing to use false flag incidents, quote unquote false flags. We know that's a very distinct capability. I personally have got to experience Russian plausible deniability back in 2018 in Syria, and that's just a fact of dealing with the Russian Federation. War crimes, generally speaking, of this magnitude is something systematic. And it's very different. When we talk about Ukrainian war crimes, we're talking about such as what the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs brought back up today, a very early footage of what looked like Russian troops getting their kneecaps shot out by Ukrainian troops, Russian prisoners of war. Now, from that footage, it looks like, one, that they're not Ukrainian troops, to point that one out. The second to point out is the fact that from what it looks like they're being fired at with blanks. It doesn't look legitimate. There's some questionable credibility to it, but we can safely say that war crimes are being caused by some Ukrainian troops, but usually it's more independent, small groups or individuals perpetrating them, as opposed to a large mass systematic scale of doing it, if that makes sense. So, very capable, but long answer, cutting it short here at the end. Yes, Russia could in fact launch Tochka-Yuz, state it was the Ukrainians who did it, just like they did in Kramatorsk, and once again, we will dig up this old archival footage from earlier in the war, and we will bring it back, and I will show you, once again, like 12 times by the time this probably happens again, where Russia does in fact have Tochka-Yuz and is willing to use them in action because we have footage of them doing so. It might be, Demise FPS says it might be used against Slavyansk. Very possible. Slavyansk is probably their next major objective, along with Bakhmut. Bakhmut, so going back to the map here, we'll take a look. So, this doesn't tell me it's Slavyansk. Slavyansk, those troops would be concentrating going up here into the north. They actually, when we got this, they geolocated this. And they said that, and they geolocated it to the point that we know how they were turning. They were coming down here on this street here. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that. I have tried learning Ukrainian a little bit, but this is not happening. I'm so early on in this. I'm still learning mom and dad, actually. And anyway, in Lena, they basically made this left-hand turn down Lena Street. And this is going towards what we would safely say they're probably taking this over into the Bakhmut area. They could probably be bringing it down here towards Donetsk, or bringing it up towards Horlivka and putting some pressure on Bakhmut for coming here from kind of a southeasternly direction and moving up into the southwest, probably closer up towards Kostyanyanka up towards Chavanyarsk. But Bakhmut is one of the major areas for contention right now. Bakhmut's really the next major point they want to do, and what they're trying to do is they're going to push out of Lyman towards Slavyansk. Then immediately they're going to jump over here into Kramatorsk. Slavyansk has to be taken before Kramatorsk is even an option. Kramatorsk operates. It's a major rail hub. It's also a very large network of connecting roadways that's very vital to Ukrainian supply lines and ability to continue moving troops in and out of this area. But it has another effect if you do this. If you take both Bakhmut and you start taking Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, you now once again have a wide encirclement of Ukrainian forces located here in this pocket, which they had just tactically withdrawn from out of the Luhansk Oblast in order to prevent becoming encircled. Now you have a greater chance of actually encircling an even larger contingent of forces and really cutting down the Ukrainian ability to fight here and actively engage troops here in the Donbass. Losing Kramatorsk is a huge issue, and this is something that was brought up very early into the Donbass campaign of the necessity of taking Kramatorsk and the importance of it, and I'm sure we're getting ready to see the ramifications. The precursor bombardments of Bakhmut, the local areas, as well as Slavyansk and Kramatorsk are there, showing us the first phase of the Russian doctrine. And we've also seen some minor, I say minor, we watched an entire Russian artillery, or entire Russian tank company get demolished, I believe it was yesterday, and they, that is a pretty decent size scale mechanized attack. That would be more of a kind of a phase 2 kind of thing that we see. But overall, these Toskus are probably located going into the Donetsk Oblast, and they're probably getting ready to probably assist with the attacks on Bakhmut, if not just continue to perpetrate terror throughout Ukraine in general. Which is actually where we end up here next, which is here in Chasiv Yar. So at least 15 people have been killed during a Russian strike here in Chasiv Yar, which is located here in the Donetsk Oblast. According to Ukrainian Ministry of Internal Affairs, about 1 p.m. local time today, a rocket actually struck a 5-story apartment building, killing at least 15 people and injuring another 5. One man so far has been reportedly pulled out. They were in contact with roughly about 3 of them. Another 23 individuals are currently remaining underneath the rubble, and that's as per last reporting. And Pavel Krylenko, who's the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration, actually was quoted later today stating, quote, Russian occupiers fired missiles at the city of Chasiv Yar in the Donetsk region on July the 9th. 15 people were killed and 5 people were injured. There are at least 23 people under the rubble, including a 9-year-old boy. Local residential buildings were destroyed and the rescue operation is ongoing. We have a couple of different things. This is from the Ukrainian Ministry of the Ukrainian Ministry of Internal Affairs. Take a look. And obviously they're still working very far into the night at this point. And this is an immense amount of destruction that we're talking. This is a 5-story apartment building that has completely collapsed due to a Russian missile. And that's not a military target. I don't care how you want to spin it. It's not a military target. There is no way you can even attempt to say that Chasiv Yar, that apartment building in Chasiv Yar, was a military target. And it's preposterous, to say the least. And we see this scene unfolding over and over and over and over and over again all across Ukraine. And that's what's so really heartbreaking about this thing, is the total disregard on the side of the Russian forces for the Geneva Convention and international humanitarian law. And they constantly, the rhetoric that they have is constantly, we're following we are, protecting the Russian-speaking population of Russia from a genocide perpetrated by a Nazi regime in Kyiv. That is what their rhetoric is. But there is a point in which we could call this war a tragic incident and a tragic loss of life, and a reason why in the 21st century you shouldn't fight a war. There was a point in which we could say that 3 months ago. It is no longer to the point in which it's a tragedy. There is no longer a point in which this significant loss of life of civilian people is considered a tragedy. This is to the point now where the loss of human life civilian life is so horrendously systematic that it is essentially a crime against humanity. The OSCE report stated so. The High Commissioner for Human Rights of the United Nations has stated so. The OSCE voted in Birmingham regarding so by a vast majority. There is a point in which this is just a tragedy. That passed some time ago. And it's not just the loss of civilian life that we can see this. There is, when we're talking about Melitopol yesterday, this is supposed to be a quote unquote liberated region. This is supposed to be about, protecting the Donetsk People's Republics and the Luhansk People's Republics. Melitopol, they're getting accredited by the Russian education system. They're getting Russian textbooks. The signs in Mariupol and Severodonetsk are getting Russian colors. The signs in Mariupol, the road signs in Mariupol, were changed into Russian. They were dual language. They are now just Russian. There's filtration camps, at least 18 of them, the largest which is located in Bezimien. In Mariupol alone, 10,000 residents are in filtration camps. Filtration camps, if you don't know, were used during the First and the Second Chechen Wars, also known as the filtration point system. What are these for? Well, Penal Colony number 52, which is also known as the Isolation Colony, is one of these filtration camps, and what it is known for is systematic beatings, rape, torture, deprivation of sleep, water, food, sanitation, and the summary execution of individuals located in these camps. It is a concentration camp. That is the closest comparison in human history to be able to make to a filtration point system. Is a systematic use of concentration camps, similar to that of Nazi Germany. The rhetoric is also very simple. Is also very similar. You can talk about Lebensraum and using we could talk about Germany and Czechoslovakia. During why Germany wanted to take the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. The point that they're making, why, if it was just this, why would they focus on the Donbass? Well, it's not about just this. There's a breakaway region that's been unrecognized for 30 years since the fall of the Soviet Union here in Transnistria, Moldova, and they want to connect these two, and they want to block off access from Ukraine to the Black Sea. That is why this is happening. JL stated this is both a genocide and terroristic strategy. Lack of accuracy of weapons or poor area recon is no excuse for that, but we all know they do it on purpose. That is kind of the point, yeah. It is terror. It's state-sponsored terrorism to be firing into Kharkiv and these locations that have no military value whatsoever at this point and no strategic value for the Russians. It is an act of terror. It's a state-sponsored act of terror. This amount of war crimes, a war is going to have war crimes. You can look at Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 years, and there are so many war crimes that occurred over 20 years that it's ridiculous. But they're all individuals who did this. They've been prosecuted. You could call the entirety of Iraq a war crime, but we also protested Iraq in 2003 when it happens. In Russia, you get sent to jail for up to 15 years. So that is kind of the situation. It's systematic. It's beyond the point, and it's not just that. Pillaging is considered a war crime. Yet you see steel being taken from this different steel mills out of Mariupol and is being brought back to Russia for Russian use. You see Kherson Oblast, the use of agricultural equipment. Some of this, including John Deere, has GPS geolocation devices inside of them that you can automatically turn them off from anywhere in the world. They were brought back to Chechnya, and the dealership turned them off. So that way they couldn't be used. They had to be turned on by the dealership. And we know this is happening. We know this is happening all over Ukraine. This how much grain has been stolen. Berdyansk was openly celebrating the fact that they were stealing grain out of these regions. It's beyond a point of a tragedy. When you talk about crimes against humanity, you're talking about very widespread crimes against humanity. You're talking about systematic use of war crimes as a way of fighting a war. It's not even to talk about the legislation, but that's for a different time. As we jump down here, we can see the S-300's batteries are now finding new life here on the front lines. The Russians have converted the S-300 land-to-air anti-air system to a land-to-land, so basically a general artillery system using their own version of GPS, which has been now added. The likelihood of this is pretty substantial. The S-300, we know at least 6 S-300 missiles were fired into Mykolaiv Oblast, and did end up, hitting civilian infrastructure, of course. But the S-300 not being built for this purpose is very inaccurate in doing so. It is not an accurate weapon system, and they're knowingly employing it. What this could be an indicator of is the lack of actual conventional munitions built for this purpose. We were talking about the Caliber cruise missiles, the basically all theater ballistic missiles, to include the Tachka-U's X-22s, the Calibers, the Iskander-Ms. All of those would fall into that category, and they must be running out of them. The S-300 has a very significant range. It's a large warhead, and the employment in this way indicates that they are now running out of those stockpiles, which is something that we have already discussed at pretty good length here on the channel, and it's a very good indicator, as well as the fact that most of these missile systems have been found to be, that they are employing still, are using dual purpose parts that are originally meant for Roscosmos based off of their serial numbers. So it's a very important factor into this war, and it shows the depletion of Russian stockpiles.
Yeah.
And this is Vitaly Kim, who is the head of the Luhansk Regional Military Administration.
Из Украины. Давненько не выходил, работы много. Так, конкретики. Смотрите, первое, знаю, что там в сети есть, собирают деньги на ремонт крыши по Крылова 12. Мы с мэром обсудили возможность, проработали с казначейством, как выделить, материалы уже есть, как выделить деньги на работу. Сейчас мэр подробно об этом расскажет, и этот вопрос мы решим с ремонтом крыши. Первое. Второе. Участились обстрелы ракетные, мы там начали разбираться, пытаться выяснить, как это происходит и почему. Орки переделывают С-300 ракеты, которые противовоздушные, потому что им, типа, их слишком много, старые, ставят какие-то там модуль GPS, чтобы стрелять по земле. Он из-за этого не точный, потому что РЛСом сопровождается воздушная цель. И вот это они по 12 ракет стреляют, и сейчас взялись там за села, в том числе Березнеговатая, в радиусе, да, там ангары разбивают, поэтому будьте осторожны, слушайте воздушную тревогу. И последнее, что хотел сказать бы, у нас до сегодня там 2 аварии с участием военными, мы об этом говорили, о правилах дорожного движения, то есть очень печально, там молодые ребята на ровном месте, скажем так. И сам, когда езжу по городу, по области, вижу, что военные злоупотребляют своим положением, нашей любовью касаемо правил дорожного движения. Аварийка и попер. Вот предупреждаю всех наших военных, которых я очень сильно люблю. Буду ездить, увижу, кто нарушает это правило без реальной потребы, запомню машину, лично отберу. Ребята, пожалуйста, соблюдайте правила дорожного движения, уважайте всех участников дорожного движения, это приводит к очень плохим последствиям. Всем добра, разом до перемоги. Доброго.
So we do know that they are using those Iskander, or they are using the S-300 batteries as now a cruise missile. Over here in Kryvyi Rih, where we covered yesterday, there was a strike in Kryvyi Rih. Unfortunately, one of the victims was a dance sport Olympian, Daria Kurdel, who was killed in the shelling. She has now been confirmed as one of the latest victims regarding the shelling that occurred yesterday. Down here, as we move into the kind of Crimea and Kherson Oblast, there is now, we can safely say that the Ukrainians are getting ready to launch a counteroffensive. They warned the Kherson and Zaporizhia Oblasts yesterday that that civilians needed to leave the area. They were getting ready to launch a massive offensive in order to kind of minimize civilian casualties. Russia's response to this is more. These are Russian vehicles. These are Russian armored vehicles that are being flatbedded by train car through Crimea and up into the Kherson Oblast. The issue is, of course, that with every loss of a tank, it also incurs the loss of a tank crew. And these are mostly vehicles that are being brought out of the mothball fleets. They are not upgraded or modernized like their early war compatriots were. And so most of them are lacking major external armor. And they're lacking a lot of major modern features that would make these really viable for the war. At this point, they're just plugging and chugging. We've even seen them using T-62 tanks in this war, which are heavily obsolete and just should not be employed in a modern battlefield in any capacity. But let's go ahead and take a look. So, just more. They're just looking for more. The more that they can throw into this war. But they're lacking reactive armor. They're lacking side skirts, which are very basic. I mean, absolutely basic when it comes to anything to put on your tank. They're lacking basically any of the advanced components that would make these viable for military use in any sense of the modern warfare, And that's the important thing to know. Even the T-72s that we saw early on in the war, the heavily upgraded, modernized versions of the T-72, were outdated. They're outdated weapon systems. They're just, it's an economically affordable way of modernizing your military. And I'm not going to hate on the T-72 too much. It has a lot of good features. It has a lot of great design features. It's got some shortcomings, but it was meant for a different war. It was meant for a war not in the 21st century, but in the late 20th century. And it would have been great in its role, but it's not great for this. And that's tanks are a tool. Russia uses them kind of all-purpose, but tanks are nothing but a specific tool. It's a specific weapon. It's a specific tool for a specific job and a specific type of objective. Russia uses them for everything. They think the mobility and the brute force is everything, when in the modern 21st century, it's not. That's not how you want to fight a war, and that's why you're seeing such immense casualties. Russia simply doesn't have the numbers to make up for it. They're pulling from some of their oldest stockpiles already. We see failings in their missile systems that were improperly stored for such a long period of time. We're seeing them pull old equipment from the front line to the front lines use. We've seen equipment from World War I on both sides being used, including the Maxim machine gun. We've seen the Mosin Nagant, which has been in service for like 200 years now, being brought into this war. So, or over 100 years, I should say. 200's a little bit extreme, but it's regardless. You understand what I'm saying. It's old. These weapon systems are not great. They're not meant for action anymore, but they're seeing it anyway because they don't have the modern military means to put anything else into this conflict. The only thing that they're not trying to make up for in a massive quantity at this point is manpower, and we know that they're having manpower shortages because of the conscription within the LNR and the DNR, as well as the use of Syrian forces here in the Kherson Oblast, which I would think that Russia would never use. In fact, I stated that very early on in the war when I saw it to several other people that work here on the channel with us. I never thought they would use the Syrians, but they do. And Gherkin has confirmed that there are huge losses in the Kherson Oblast. Gherkin, for those that don't know, Igor Gherkin, we have a source for the Ukrainians that is called Igor Gherkin. It's kind of it makes fun of Igor Gherkin. Igor Gherkin was actually very prominent within the Russian political spectrum. He's a very big advocate for Russia, but he also has some criticisms, but he can get away with it to an extent, just being part of really that higher level within the Russian government kind of knowledge. And he's a very big propagandist. But we can see here, he was an FSB colonel during the war in the war in the Donbass. And he says, this is today at 5 a.m. and again 10 a.m. the enemy carried out powerful missile strikes in Kherson a day before similar strikes were carried out in Nakokovska hydropower plant. The enemy continues the powerful missile strikes in Donbass. Most likely, the Russian air defense, which previously quite relatively, coped with the attacks with Trochka used in Oregon, turned out largely ineffective against the massive strikes of HIMARS missiles. Today, once again, burning and detonating the Shakhtarsk worse than last time. In the past 5 to 7 days, over 10 large artillery and other munition stockpiles were hit, several oil depots, around 10 command points, and roughly as many personnel locations in our near and far rear area, in our far rears. In addition to several air defense and artillery positions, this resulted in large losses in personnel and equipment. I am not writing this to inform Ukrainians about the effectiveness of their strikes. They know it better and earlier than me. And not to gloat, which all kinds of pseudo-patriotic scum accuses me of, but to ask one single question: when will the Russian Federation armed forces start fighting with full force? I.e., when will destructive strikes be carried out at the transport system of the so-called Ukraine, which supplies all these HIMARS, 777s, Caesars, and ammunition for them, and safely brought unhindered into the combat zone? Well, that's the thing. They're already there, so there's not going to be a whole lot they can do, guys. Like, you're just kind of screwed. I hate to say it. Actually, I don't, but you're just kind of screwed. It's a little late for that. More ammunition depots were destroyed here in the Kherson Oblast. In fact, this is coming from the Operational Command South. The armed forces of Ukraine destroyed 4 Russian ammunition depots in the Mykolaiv and Kherson regions on July the 9th, end quote. And over here in Mykolaiv received additional shelling. This has come in. I misspoke. Vitaly Kim is the head of the Mykolaiv Regional Military Administration at the Luhansk. Sorry, I get them mixed up. I apologize. Russian troops shelled Mykolaiv region on July the 9th. Three people were killed, and that's coming from Vitaly Kim himself. But that is it for all of the news ongoing inside of the country of Ukraine. But don't worry, we got plenty of other stuff that's coming outside of Ukraine, and we'll get to that here very shortly. So the first thing we have is up here in Moscow, where Moscow has currently the Wall of Shame. Political commissars of the Russian army began to put up boards of shame with people who refuse to fight in Ukraine. So, pretty interesting. And someone just commented on Germany not having this stuff to send supplies. Demisa FPS said, the thing about Germany, they really don't have the equipment to send over. They literally have to scavenge their own units in order to participate in NATO exercises. There's too much red tape. Yeah. I would say so. There's a lot of that has to do with the fact that Germany was bombed quite literally into submission during World War II and now has become a pacifist country. And the war in Ukraine has really caused them to do a 180. All of the NATO members agreed to a 2% GDP regarding their military. And so that way they could all support very strong militaries. Germany has never reached that 2% GDP. In fact, that was why it was such a big announcement when they said we're gonna go up to 2% of our GDP on our military forces, when that was the goal, 10 years ago. So that's the thing. Germany really is. They have some amazing tanks. The Leopard 2 is an amazing tank. The Gepard is an amazing tank. They're amazing anti-aircraft platform. It's not a tank, but these are amazing in their own right. But just like the Tiger tank of World War II, there's not a lot of them. There's not a lot of Gepards. There's not a lot of Leopards. There's not a lot of Leopard 2s or 1s. There's not a lot of anything. They really do scrape together what they can for even NATO exercises, and that's because of their pacifist nature over the last 80 years. They really aren't looking to fight a war. They don't want to fight a war. The last time they fought a war, it utterly destroyed their country, and they did it twice. World War I and II. Germany's not interested in getting into a war, and they didn't foresee this being really a thing until now. And now all of Germany is kind of taking, kind of looking aghast and going, oh crap, we really need to bolster our military forces. This is a very different world than what it was 30 years ago, because I think everyone kind of squandered the 30 years between the fall of the Soviet Union and the rise of Putin's Russia. They really I think all Western countries are equally had squandered that opportunity of time, because time is a valuable commodity and it's never on your side to begin with. That's not the only thing going on in Russia, though. As we move over here, we have major flooding here in Siberia. Torrential rains are leaving Russia flooded as massive thunderstorms struck Moscow, including causing the deaths of several civilians and injuring several others from lightning strikes. But the runoff from these have also caused torrential floods, as they have basically flooded out all of the rivers, including this is the village of Surdok, which was located in the Sakha Republic here in Siberia, which has been completely flooded and is currently underwater. I mean, this thing, it's flooded. It's gone. And we can see some of the damage coming from the thunderstorms that were hitting Moscow. It's just knocking over entire trees. But yeah, pretty massive flooding, a lot of injuries. You can see some of that here. It's not the only thing. As we move over here into the Kuril Islands, a volcanic eruption is occurring at the Abeco volcano, which has started its precursor eruption. It's spewing out about the ash cloud is rising about 2 kilometers in the air thus far, and it's also spewing out lava at this point. This is from very early in the eruption. As we move back over into Central Europe, we can see that the World Food Program has, this is kind of encapsulates the whole world, but I just kind of put it here in Europe for my own sanity, considering this is where most of the UN is located. And the World Food Program explains collateral hunger. This is something we've talked about to a great extent, and this is a lot of what we are trying to, put forward in this, in regards to, we talk about a lot of disasters when it comes to lack of food, food insecurities, water insecurities, globally, Somalia, Ethiopia, obviously the refugees from Ukraine. And they actually have a video out. This is the UN's World Food Program, and they explain the term collateral hunger, which is really the ramifications of what this is going on globally. And according to the World Food Program, for every 1% rise in food costs, 10 million people are put into severe poverty where they can no longer afford it. So just keep that statistic in mind, and we're going to go ahead, and I think this is something important for all of us to watch.
Collateral hunger. It's happening right now around the world. But what does it mean? Let's break it down. In this case, The word collateral describes a secondary, incidental situation triggered by an initial situation that already happened or is occurring. When paired with the word hunger, it becomes clear that we are talking about food security, which impacts hunger. The collateral hunger we're witnessing now stems from the multiple crises currently happening in our world. Conflict, climate extremes, rising costs, and struggling economies all play a part. Let's consider the ripple effect from the conflict in Ukraine as one example. So, the conflict is the initial situation, forcing people to flee Ukraine, leaving them hungry and uncertain about where their next meal will come from. As the world's breadbasket, Ukrainian agricultural production and food exports are critical to feeding the world. Seaports in the region are also vital routes for global food exports. These factors impact global markets, driving rising food costs, energy and fuel costs, and making it harder for food to reach those who need it the most. So you see, the effect the conflict in Ukraine has on hunger reaches far from the conflict itself. Collateral hunger means vulnerable children, women and men in places already facing catastrophic conditions also risk paying the price for conflict waged on the other side of the world. With donor support, WFP can avoid making further ration cuts. We can take further action to address the skyrocketing levels of need. We can provide life-saving food and cash assistance to hungry people on the brink of famine. We can invest in hope by delivering school feeding programs and other initiatives to provide social protection. The wave of collateral hunger is rising fast, but we have ways to address its impact.
So normally we don't show that kind of stuff here on the channel, right? But I think it's important for everyone to understand the ramifications of what's happening. And that is really the whole point of this channel. That's the whole point of what we do here. When it comes to what we're trying to do is we're trying to help the people affected by the very news that we talk about every day. We talk about global news and not just the war in Ukraine. We talk about stuff going on in Africa, in Asia, and, you know, in Europe, in North and South America. We talk about everything going on globally, whether that's food insecurities, conflict, water insecurities, natural disasters, climate change, and we try to keep it uplifting too. But the main point of this channel is to help people globally. And that's why the description is so important. Everything that we have located there, your input as viewers, you know, into coming on and joining us and letting us know, you know, that, you know, if you have additional things that we could be donating to, if we have additional sources that we can go to, and we can, you know, go through and vet these charity organizations, get them added. And I'm not just talking about for Ukraine. There's a lot of them. I understand that, and there's a lot of focus on Ukraine. But places like Ethiopia, Somalia, they're cutting rations many times by half. They're talking about having to cut rations for millions of people in already affected areas, in places that are experiencing probably some of the most severe climate change issues and severe droughts. The drought in Somalia is the worst that it's been in 40 years. Children under the age of 5 in Somalia and Ethiopia are the most at risk because they can't fend for themselves. They literally cannot beg, borrow, or steal food and water. And millions are expected to die. This is the highest amount of refugees in the world, according to the UN. It's in recorded history. And so, please make sure to give your support to those in the description. I really give your support to those in the description. We really want to help. And let your friends know about us, because the more people here, the more we can help. And that's the whole point of this project, and it's only driven by you guys. So, thank you very much for the support already, but that's the point of the project. And that video right there is why this is so important, because the war in Ukraine has lasting effects, and these effects will be felt for decades. Climate change is a continual issue, and we constantly am talking about that. And we're just going to continue seeing these effects for at least probably our entire lifetimes. As we jump down here into the Middle East, the first thing we have is actually down here in Yemen. Well, there has been a newfound peace. There's a truce between Houthi rebels and Saudi Arabian coalition forces. However, that peace is not pertaining to all. The Islamic State took responsibility for an attack on Houthi rebels in the Al-Bayda region of Yemen. And so they ended up attacking a convoy of Houthi rebels that were operating on motorcycles, and they detonated a suicide bomber next to them. And this is them taking responsibility for that attack. Let's jump over here into Afghanistan. The attack in Kabul, which ended up killing a Taliban police chief, with the use of at least 2 IEDs, has been claimed by the Islamic State as well. While they do both at one point were considered terrorist insurgencies, the Islamic State and the Taliban do not share the same types of ideologies and are actively fighting each other. The security situation in Afghanistan is not very good at all, despite the Taliban having consolidated most of their power within the country, and the Islamic State is exploiting those insecurities and is even using it to attack other locations, such as Uzbekistan, where we saw the attacks on Termez that have happened several times now. But we can see that they are, in fact, taking responsibility for that attack as well. It's not the only thing. Major floods are occurring here in eastern Afghanistan and within the Ghazni region, or the Ghazni province. And this has left this is affecting not just one, but several provinces all at once. So far, about 5 people have been killed and another 20 injured. So we move up here into Kyrgyzstan. We can see that a glacier collapsed on the mountains of Kyrgyzstan. The glacier descended, and there was a bunch of tourists. It's a very hot tourist spot here. And they were filming, but they did not move to a safe distance before filming, and many of them got caught up in this. 2 girls were hospitalized with bruises and other injuries, but that's only according to preliminary data. And take a look at this now.
Oh dear God.
Yeah, so if you ever see something like this, probably don't stand there and record it. I know it probably looks cool and it's fascinating, but don't put yourself in danger for the stuff like that. I mean, it's not worth it, guys. It really isn't. We jump down here into Bangkok, Thailand, where the United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken is visiting Bangkok, and they signed 2 agreements to constitute a kind of a strategic establishment or a strategic alliance and partnership. And with these memorandums, the first document aims to strengthen cooperation between the 2 countries' law enforcement, cybersecurity, and dealing with climate change together. The second document, according to Mr. Blinken, said that it will make it easier for Thailand and the United States to quickly share information and consult on potential disruptions in the supply chain so that parties can take swift action to mitigate problems. We can see here during his visit to Thailand. As we jump down here into Africa, we have a couple of different situations. The first one we're going to hit on is up here in Burkina Faso, where militants killed 4 and injured an additional 8. Militants attacked a village within the San Matanga region of Burkina Faso. 4 civilians were reportedly killed, with 8 government troops being injured after gunmen opened fire. No group so far has claimed the attack or claimed responsibility, but the Al-Qaeda-linked group JNIM, which has been suspected of operating in the area by the government forces, is likely one of the lead suspects regarding this attack in Samatanga. And down here, as we jump into South Africa, we have a couple of different incidents that occurred. There are 2 separate incidents that happened back to back. Both of them were random shootings in the town of Soweto and Pietermaritzburg, where gunmen opened fire in crowded bars, killing and wounding those inside. The motives behind the attacks are unknown, and the gunmen are still on the loose. It appeared to have been complete random shootings that ended up killing at least 18 and injuring an additional 31. And now we can get into some of the more interesting topics of the night. First thing we have is up here, just off the coast of Alaska, where a strange translucent fish was spotted in the icy depths of the Bering Strait. So it's kind of like a gelatinous fish that has kind of like suction cups on its belly, and it made a surprise appearance to scientists who were studying near Alaska. It's an odd blotched snailfish, which is a seafloor dwelling creature. Lives exclusively in the northern Pacific and can survive at more than 2,723 feet or 830 meters below the ocean surface. Many researchers who held the fish body said it was very gelatinous, and it felt like holding a lump of jello. The blotched snailfish have bodies that are almost entirely see-through, apart from their eyes, their stomachs, and dark spots on their skin. Like several other species of snailfish, blotched snailfish have modified fins on their belly that form a suction cup. This allows them to easily attach to rocks and coral on the ocean floor and avoid expending energy to constantly swim around, particularly in strong currents. And that is what it looks like. That is creepy. Not putting it in my hands, I'm sorry. But if you want some more regarding this fish, you can check out Live Science, who are the ones that initially reported this. I just don't think I would enjoy the texture of that, guys. It just kind of gives me chills just thinking about touching that thing. As we move over here into the UK, a 1600-year-old Anglo-Saxon cemetery has been found. It's a Weltham pagan burial ground dating back at least into the first years of the Anglo-Saxon invasion of Britain during the 5th century AD. It's been uncovered ahead of the high-speed rail project. The new discoveries, which include more than 100 skeletons, are amongst the most important archaeological finds made along the HS2 route. The burial ground is near the town of Wendover, which has one of the earliest traces of Anglo-Saxon habitation anywhere in Britain. The Anglo-Saxons buried at Wendover were definitely armed, but there's no other evidence that the people buried there had lived a violent life of frequent fighting with the Romano-British. They are certainly the first generations who were living at the end of the Roman administration, but whether or not they were the first generations who came over from the continent, we won't know until we do things like the isotope analysis, said Rachel Wood, who is a lead archaeologist on the project. But this is really cool, to say the least. So there's not a whole lot that's known about Anglo-Saxon culture. Everyone likes to think of what the Anglo-Saxons may have been like. But believe it or not, there's not a whole lot of evidence. They lived so long ago at the end of the reign of the Romans, that it was really, you talk about the fall of the Roman Empire, you talk about, the Dark Ages of Europe, and that's really kind of the period in which the Anglo-Saxons flourished on the continent. A lot of their stuff also was rather primitive, and so it hasn't necessarily survived very long. I mean, you're talking about the early Iron Age. A lot of this stuff just doesn't last when it comes to things that are, it really doesn't lend itself very well to surviving the tests of time, such as Roman walls and stuff that are built of stone do. And so there's just not a whole lot that we know. We have some mounts, we have some general places on where Anglo-Saxon and Viking settlements may have been. We have some general ideas, but in truth, there isn't a lot that's known. And a lot of times when you're reading about Anglo-Saxon culture, there's a lot of stuff that's had the gaps filled in, with something that is plausible but isn't necessarily true. It's really cool subject. If you guys ever want to look up on it, I took an entire British literature class at one point, and we talked about the Anglo-Saxons for a long period of time in that. And it was really fascinating to get into. But I hope that you guys find that fascinating. If you guys want to check out more, once again, you can check out Live Science, who once again have an entire article regarding this that you can do a deeper dive on it. But other than that, that's actually all the news ongoing in the world today. A ton of stuff obviously happening. We have tons of floods and glaciers melting and war and other things. Not necessarily something that I enjoy talking about all the time, but it's definitely something that is important to bring up and important to talk about regardless, because the more that you know, the better prepared you are when you're going out into the world and having a lot of intellectual discussions on this. So I hope that you find this very informative and very interesting, and I really hope that you guys are paying attention to kind of the different situations ongoing in the world and are trying to do your best to help, because there's no better thing that we can do than help. And that's the whole point of this project, like I said, is we want to be able to be the news that gives back to the very topics that we talk about here every day. And I hope that you guys will continue to allow us to do that. So if you check out in the description below, you're going to see a ton of different links, and all of these are for organizations that span the entire globe. Many of them are located for Ukraine, of course, with the ongoing war in there, and the refugee and internally displaced peoples, but also for places like Ethiopia, Somalia, and generally just Africa in Southeast Asia, where we're trying to also make a difference. And if you have any others, our Discord and website links are in the description. You can go ahead and check those out as well. But please, the best way to get a hold of a staff member is on the Discord. You can go and check them out, or check out the Discord there, and let a staff member know if you have any additional organizations or charities to add to that list. We have had several already given to us. We're vetting several right now, and we would like to get more added on to the list to kind of keep that going. We'll have a continual list. Unfortunately, there's a character limit here on YouTube, so we will also have a running list on our official website for you guys that will include everything as well, and on our Discord too. So please make sure you check that stuff out and give your support to those organizations. If you can't give a lot to them, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, give us a like and subscribe and let your friends know about us. The more people that are here can enjoy the way that we do the news, but the most importantly, the more people that are here, the more good we can ultimately do as a community for people globally, and with some of these really tragic situations ongoing. So once again, I thank you for the support that you're giving those organizations. I can't thank you enough for that, and I can't thank you enough for the support that you've given us as a channel. But with that, I hope that you guys have a wonderful rest of your night. Please have a wonderful Monday and a wonderful Tuesday, because we do not stream on Monday nights. We take the day off. I need a break after looking at rather depressing stuff all week. So I hope that you guys will enjoy your next 2 days and an early start to your week. Please don't tire yourself out too much on Monday. I hope that you remain safe, that your family and your friends remain safe. And if not, I hope that you do find that safety and security in the very near future. And please make sure to check out. You can come in and chat. We'll still be active on the Discord, but we will be streaming once again on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central, and I hope that you'll be back to join us then. In the meantime, please enjoy the early part of your week, and I hope that you have a wonderful Monday and Tuesday. Other than that, I will talk to you guys later. My name is Paul from the New News, and have a wonderful rest of your night and a wonderful start to your week.